Hey everyone! In this video, we're going to look at one of the most beautiful chess games I've ever seen, and probably one of the most beautiful you've ever seen too. It was played way back in 1948 between Boris Sieff, a player we don't know much about, and Grandmaster Isaac Kashdan, an American grandmaster, writer, and, at one point in his life, one of the top 10 strongest chess players in the world. So we'll be watching the game from Boris Sieff's perspective, who is playing with the white pieces. The game begins with pawn to d4, knight to f6, pawn to c4, white takes control of the center with his pawns, but black isn't sleeping, pawn to e6. Later, black will aim to strike in the center with pawn to d5. White develops his knight to c3, and black pins the knights with bishop to b4. That's the Nimzo-Indian defense, just like in the previous video. This bishop not only pins the knight to the king, but also threatens to capture it, potentially damaging white's pawn structure. White plays queen to c2, preventing that idea. Now if black captures on c3, white will simply recapture with the queen. Black strikes in the center with d5, white chases the bishop away. The bishop retreats to e7, and after the exchange on d5, white develops the bishop to f4. Now there's a real threat of knight to b5, which would put heavy pressure on the c7 square, creating a fork against the rook and the king. But of course, the grandmaster doesn't fall for that. He calmly plays c6, taking control of the b5 square. White plays h3, giving their bishop an escape square, just in case. Kashdan castles his king to safety, while white still has some work to do before doing the same. They continue with e3, opening a path for their bishop. Rook to e8, and white develops the bishop to d3, aiming directly at the h7 square. Black begins developing the queen side with knight to d7. White responds with knight to f3, and black reroutes their knight to f8, a clear maneuver planning to go either to g6, e6, or simply to defend h7 if needed. White jumps forward with knight to e5, still keeping their intentions about castling unclear. Bishop to d6 by black, hinting at a possible exchange of dark-squared bishops in the future. White finally castles, and black's knight moves to e6, chasing the white bishop away. The bishop retreats to h2, and black pushes g6, setting up a solid barrier against white's light-squared bishop. Smartly, white brings their knight back to f3, offering a trade of the dark-squared bishops. But black declines for now. Instead, they make a true grandmaster move, knight to g7. Yes, the knight has lost quite a few tempos trying to reach this position, but nothing critical. The center remains solid, and white can't really take advantage of the knight on g7. Black is planning to solve the problem of their bishop, which is blocked by its own pawn. Soon it will come out to an active square on f5, exchanging itself for white's more active bishop. Boris decides to trade bishops on d6, and after queen takes d6, rook to c1. Black develops their last minor piece and catches a white bishop in a trade net. It can't retreat now because of the queen. Meanwhile, white repositions their knight to d2, possibly preparing to move closer to the queen side in the future. Then rook to e7, preparing to double rooks on the e-file, and here some warning signs start to appear for white. Still, they go for b4. Their plan is to minority attack on the queen side, ideally pushing b5, trading pawns, and creating a weak pawn in black's camp. Kashdan activates his last undeveloped piece. Now both rooks are fully in the game, and one of them is glaring menacingly down the e-file, targeting the pawn. White brings their rook to b1, and let's take a look at the overall picture. In this position, white's pieces are mostly centered and leaning toward the queen side, while black's forces are all pointing at the king side. Both rooks control the center, the queen is ready to join the attack anywhere, and both the knight and bishop are ideally placed. Not to mention, the other knight can jump into the fight at any moment. Taking advantage of the fact that white's pieces are far from their king, black strikes first. Bishop takes on h3, sacrificing the bishop for just a pawn. Let's figure this out. White has to capture that bishop, otherwise they'll simply be a pawn down with no compensation, and black's attack will only grow stronger. So white captures, and here comes a truly unexpected and brilliant move. Try to find the strongest move for black in this position. That move is rook to e3, and yes, that's exactly what was played in the game. So black sacrifices a second piece in a row for just one pawn, this time an entire rook. White decides not to capture the rook, instead bringing their bishop back to help defend the king. And that's understandable. If white had taken the rook, they would have lost almost instantly. Let's see why. After queen flies to g3 with check, and no matter where the king runs, an absolutely devastating attack follows. The king can go either to h1 or f1, and both options lead to the same fate. If king to h1, then queen takes on h3, and after a few checks, king to h1 comes to crushing knight to g4, threatening checkmate in 1 with queen to h2. White is forced to defend with knight to f1, blocking the attack, but that only delays the inevitable. Because after knight to f2, white has no choice but to capture that knight or it's checkmate on the next move, and after the exchange, black is left with an extra queen. White has absolutely no compensation here. After calculating the lines, they realize that capturing the rook on e3 is completely losing, so they play the strongest move instead. The only correct move, bishop to f1, defending the pawn on h3, and now the rook on e3 is under attack. It even looks like white can finally capture it safely soon. But then, out of nowhere, black hits with knight to f5, like thunder out of a clear sky. Black is once again inviting white to take the rook on e3, and this time, it turns out they actually should. It's the only move that keeps them in the game. So white finally captures the rook on e3. At this point, black is down a bishop and a rook for just 2 pawns, but in return, they have a crushing attack. Queen flies to g3 with check. White can finally block the attack with their bishop, for now, the only piece standing between their king and disaster. But then, queen takes on e3, another check. The king cannot run to f1 because that would be checkmate in 1. Knight to g3, and the queen covers all escape squares. So the king retreats to h1, but the attack continues. Knight to g3 check. The white king is being trampled by hoofs. The only move is king to h2, and then queen to f4, creating multiple mating threats. The queen stands in X-ray alignment with the white king. If the knight moves, it could be deadly. White must act, so they played knight to f3, covering the h2 square to avoid mate. But here comes the shocker. Black sacrifices yet another rook on e2. Isaac Kashdan continues his masterpiece, attacking both the queen and the bishop on g2, the key defender of the king. Boris decides to capture the rook with the knight, but after knight takes e2, black's queen captures back with check, a discovered attack. The king is forced back to h1. It might look like white has survived, but Kashdan isn't done yet. The knight jumps to h5, threatening knight to g3 check, which would completely trap the white king. Capturing the knight on e2 doesn't work either because of knight to g3, a fork on the king and queen. Desperately, white plays queen to d2, hoping to simplify, but it's too late. After knight to g3 check, king to a2, knight to f1 check, a double check, there's no blocking it. The king runs to e1, and it seems he's safe. But Kashdan ends the symphony with a final masterpiece. Queen sacrifices on h2. White is forced to capture, and after knight takes h2, the 2 remaining knights deliver the final blow. Knight to g3 checkmate. An absolutely brilliant attack. Black sacrificed every single piece except 2 knights, and those very knights delivered the final, elegant checkmate. If you enjoyed this incredible game, make sure to subscribe, drop a like, and share it with your chess-loving friends. Thanks for watching, and remember, chess is beautiful.